Good evening, everyone. I'm Alex Ago, the Director of Programming at the USC School of Cinematic Arts. Together with the generous support of the USC Visions and Voices Arts and Humanities program and the brilliance of Thomas Allen Harris and his extraordinary team at Family Pictures USA, we're proud to present Family Pictures USC, How I Got Here, a two-part series inviting members of the USC community to share their personal stories of family and the journeys that brought them to the University of Southern California. The Visions and Voices program acknowledges that USC was built on the sacred land of the Tongva Nation. We honor the Tongva and all indigenous people, past, present, and future, and their continued survival and contributions to our society. We also honor the legacy of the African diaspora and recognize that this country would not exist without the free enslaved labor of Black people. We share these acknowledgements to pay respect to the original caretakers of this land, to raise awareness about histories that are too often erased or forgotten, and to affirm our commitment to social change. While tonight's presentation welcomes participants from our USC staff and faculty, the second part of this series invites USC students of all majors to submit their own stories and family photographs for consideration to participate in a live student-focused session hosted by Thomas on Wednesday, January 22nd, 2022. Sorry, January 26th. Submission details will be announced in the days shortly following tonight's presentation. Before I introduce our host, I'd like to express my tremendous gratitude to each of the participants sharing with us tonight. I can't wait to discover their stories alongside everyone watching it online. My many thanks to Dawn, Quentin, and Lindsay from Family Pictures USA for their support, enthusiasm, and hard work that went into putting tonight's show together, along with the wonderful staff from Visions and Voices. And now let me tell you more about your host. Thomas Allen Harris is a critically acclaimed interdisciplinary artist who explores family, identity, and spirituality in a participatory practice. Since 1990, Harris has remixed archives from multiple origins throughout his work, challenging hierarchy within historical narratives through the use of pioneering documentary and research methodologies that center vernacular image and collaboration. In 2009, Harris and his team founded Digital Diaspora Family Reunion, a transmedia project that explores and shares the rich and revealing narratives found within family photo albums. Working in partnership with museums, festivals, educational institutions, and cultural art spaces, DDFR organizes workshops, performances, and exhibitions that create communal linkages affirming our common humanity while privileging the voices of people whose stories have often been absent, marginalized, or overlooked. The DDFR archive has grown to include 3,500 interviews with people around their family photos and 50,000 photographs. His television show, Family Pictures USA, which takes a radical look at neighborhoods and cities of the United States through the lens of family photographs, collaborative performances, and personal testimony sourced from their communities, premiered on PBS in August 2019. In 2021, Harris launched the Family Pictures Institute for Inclusive Storytelling to spread the work he's been engaged in over the past 10 plus years and expand upon it through robust research, evaluation, scholarly discussion, and artistic interpretation. The Institute is funded by the Ford Foundation and others, and will be housed at Yale University. Thank you again, Thomas, for enriching our lives with all that you do, and I'll let you take it from here.
Thank you so much, Alex. It's great to be here. Welcome, everyone. I am Thomas Allen Harris, host of Family Pictures USA, and we're happy to present Family Pictures USA at USC's School of Cinematic Art and USC's Vision and Voices, the Arts and Humanities Initiative, where we were asked to select members of the USC faculty and administration to share their personal stories of family and their journey, how I got here. We are all in journeys that involve changes in place, in time, and emotional states. These journeys lead us to where we are in this moment. and we can see our progress in the photographs we take and keep near our hearts. How many of you here online have family albums? And you could talk about it in the chat or respond in the chat. And for those of you who have family albums, how many have shared their family albums or used them creatively in the past 6 months? So what we're doing with Family Pictures is creating a new purpose for the family album. With our Family Pictures Institute for Inclusive Storytelling at Yale, we examine ways in which family albums empower storytelling while also helping us to become more understanding, empathetic, and patient with our differences. So I'll start by sharing a few of my own photographs to illuminate my motivations for doing this work. This is me on the left at, I think about 14 years old, my mom, Rudine, my stepdad, Lee, and his close friend and comrade, Copes. Lee and Copes left South Africa together with 10 other young men to help launch the global anti-apartheid movement. They were asked by Nelson Mandela to leave after the ANC was outlawed. Little did they know that they would be in exile for over 30 years, returning home only in their 60s. When my dad died, I used his photo album to introduce a new generation of young South African actors to help tell their forgotten story of these heroes, some of whom were living right next door to these actors. As a result of this process, this film became an award-winning film, and this group and this history is now celebrated nationally throughout South Africa. It showed me the value of the family album to inform and change social and national narratives. I brought this project back to America, and it became the foundation of a socially engaged art project and a PBS TV series, Family Pictures USA, as well as a new movement to create a people's history of America to better understand who we are and transform our relationship to one another. So I'll show a short clip from Family Pictures USA. Please roll tape.
If this image were in a museum, no one would doubt its importance to our shared history. But history isn't just the artifacts in institutions. It's also the precious objects we hold in our hands and hearts, the ordinary family photos that people create every day.
This is Family Pictures.
Family Pictures.
Family Pictures USA Action.
I'm Thomas Allen Harris, filmmaker, photographer, and host of Family Pictures USA. We're traveling the country, inviting everyone to share their family photos, revealing a new history of our community, our country, and ourselves. Once you see America through Family Pictures, you'll never see this country the same way again.
Our methodology helps people become more understanding, empathetic, and patient with our differences. In this series,
If this
we had
image...
people... Okay, in this series, we had people from multiple generations come and share their family photographs, exploring issues of migration, diversity of representation, urban versus rural, social, ethnic, sexual, gender, and religious orientation, as well as extended family and families of choice that encompass the full range of our humanity. The family album illuminates, informs, and educates both by what is kept in and also by what is absent. Today, we're lucky to have some wonderful special guests who will be sharing their family photographic albums and stories within them. And we're gonna start with Michael Renov, Vice Dean of Academic Affairs at the School of Cinematic Arts at USC. Welcome, Michael.
Thank you, Thomas. And thank you for being here. This is great.
Oh, it's wonderful to be here. So you have some photographs that take us back to many different places, both Louisiana and also Britain. So why don't we start with the first image?
Yeah, this is a photograph from 1952. The person at the very center is wearing the corsage, is my great-grandmother, Kalia Gold. She's, at this point, we're celebrating her 80th birthday. I'm in my dad's arms on the far right. And there are 4 generations here. Briefly, this great-grandmother, who was kind of she was the matriarch of the family. By this point, she'd been widowed almost 50 years. Her husband had come to the US in the late 1890s. He was a scholar. From what I've understood about him, spoke 5 languages. I really kind of, in my later life, identified with this guy, but he died in the yellow fever epidemic of 1903 in Shreveport, Louisiana. And his wife, my great-grandmother, brought her 3 children from, it would have then been the Russian Empire, but now it's Grodno, which is near the border of Belarus and Poland, but it was Russia at the time, came to the United States, to Shreveport, Louisiana, deep south, only to have her husband die in that yellow fever epidemic. The reason she's the matriarch is because not only did she raise the children, but she started a business. It was a department store, Gold's department store, which thrived for many years until it burnt down in 1939. And she was just the most generous person and lived to be 94. So I got a chance to know her. She didn't die until I was in like a junior in high school.
Well, and you're in this photograph, but not as a junior, you're as a little boy.
A very junior, yeah.
So tell us, where are you in this photograph?
I'm in my dad's arms on the far right. I'm the child who's kind of looking a little bit lost, wearing those little sandals.
And so your dad his story takes us to the next image. And I love that image of you. And you just made it in the photograph. So your dad actually connects us with this image. This is your mother, right?
Yeah, this is my mom. That father who was holding me in his arms was drafted, one of the great generation, right? The greatest generation. He was drafted, he was in Britain. And on a blind date, he met this woman, Cecily Caitzer, the woman on the right. And this is 1945. And she then would have been only 18 years old. And she's showing this wedding dress off to her sister, who I really have, my Aunt Pearl. She was one of 4, my mom. Aunt Pearl was, at that point in uniform, you can see she was serving at Bletchley Manor. She was one of the code breakers during World War II. And to the day she died, she wouldn't breathe a word of what happened during that time or what her role was in it. So it's part of a wonderful family mystery. In the meantime, here's this 18-year-old on the right. This photograph was sent to my dad, who was her fiance at the time, and it was printed in the Shreveport Times because it was sort of a big deal. She was a war bride. And it took the intervention of Hale Boggs to get her the visa because it was really hard to get anybody out of war-torn Europe right after the war. Hale Boggs is the father of the late great Cokie Roberts. And every time I would listen to Cokie Roberts on NPR, I would always think, thank you, Cokie, and thank you to your dad. You helped bring my parents together.
Wow. If it wasn't for him.
Well, she probably would have made it eventually, but it wouldn't have been as easy. Yeah.
Wow, it's great photograph. I mean, it's Gothic, and with that dress and them holding it up in such a way. Let's go to the next image.
Yeah, I just would say, oh, okay. But that previous image, my mom had no idea where she was going. She was in Leeds, England. She was 18 years old. She had stopped going to school during the war. She'd hate me she's no longer with us, but she stopped all formal education when the war started. She was sent out to the countryside, etc. So she was an adventurer. She met this man. She really liked him a lot. He proposed by mail, and she managed to find her way to the United States, sight unseen. Hadn't seen the guy in a year, and she married him the next day after she arrived. Okay, next photo.
And the Deep South. Let's
the
go to
Deep South.
But you're looking very Western here.
Oh yes. Well, now I got to tell you about where Shreveport is. Shreveport, Louisiana is a mere 20 miles from the Texas border. But the thing about this photograph is that it reminds me, I don't remember this being taken, but I do, my first memory is of the installation of our television set. And I think I was about 3 years old. I think the die was cast at that moment that I would be a media scholar. The TV installation allowed me to plug into another world and get very involved with fantasy and imagination. And here I think the mythos of the West. And I don't think it's entirely unconnected to say that I did eventually end up in California. And once I got here, I never looked back. If my mom's trajectory was coming from England to Louisiana, mine was a continuation west. And also the same with my dad's side of the family, who would all come from Eastern Europe at the turn of the 20th century. So westward migration, but also fantasy and imagination is what I read in this. And Americanness, very much Americanness. I bought into it big time.
Well, continuing on that theme, let's go to the next photograph. I think this one is the one with the 19th. No, the one.
No, you skipped one. Yeah, this one is crazy. Yeah. Okay, so I don't remember this photograph at all, but when I ran across it by looking for these things, this one just fascinated me, and I tried to figure out, why am I looking so proud of myself? Why am I looking so self-assured as an 8-year-old? And I thought, okay, the date was on, you know how photographs used to have the dates on them? This says June 1959. So that means I just finished the 3rd grade. I was on vacation. Things were looking good. But here's the other thing I would want to point to. I'm leaning against this 59 Chevy, which was the first car we owned that was air conditioned. Oh. And if you're growing up in Shreveport, Louisiana, an air conditioned car is a big deal. That very summer, we were about to take a road trip, the longest road trip we'd ever done as a family, and across Texas all the way to New Mexico. And I don't think we could have done it without the air conditioning. So I think I was proud of feeling upwardly mobile or something, you know, like we've entered the middle class because we now have an air conditioned car.
And you look like you have either keys on attached to your pants there, or maybe it's a whistle.
Let's say it's a whistle.
It's a whistle. Okay, let's go to the next photograph. And so this is
jumping way ahead now.
This is continuing with this theme of travel, which is something that we have in abundance throughout the rest of the evening.
Yes, indeed. Yeah. So this is 1998. This is the family that I was able to be a part of later in life. My wife, Kathy, my 2 children, Veronica and Maddie. We are standing in Gamlestan, which is the old city part of Stockholm, Old Town in Stockholm. It's the year's 1998. I'm there to teach a seminar at Stockholm University. The kids came with. They went to school for a while, learned a little bit of Swedish. And then we had a Ural pass, and we traveled around Europe together, and it was idyllic. And I look at this, they're eating ice cream, and we're all just really happy. And for me, it's a bit the picture of happiness.
Indeed. And it's wonderful, you know, to see the arc of your family, and it's also that the blessing of having 4 generations, you know, that you started at that particular moment, and the evolution of, you know, family and family portraits through the years.
And I'm happy to say both of those children ended up becoming USC graduates. So if we're going to try to figure out how it comes back to me and how it comes back to USC, that would be part of that story, I think.
Wonderful. Well, Michael, thank you so much. And it's, you know, also for the friendship and the mentorship you provided over the years. And may it continue, the friendship.
Thank you, Thomas. Much appreciated.
Okay, so we have our next guest is Dean Elizabeth Daly. And welcome, Elizabeth. Thank you so much for being part of this community photo share.
Well, thank you, Thomas. We're delighted to do this.
So we're going to go to your first photograph, which is also a black and white image. So let's see this image and tell us who this person is and why this was the image you wanted to start the story with.
Well, there's an image. This is my father. There was also an image of my mother, and I think that my story is very much a part of each of them. I think the interesting thing about my father is, and I have no idea when this was taken, but my father was considerably older when I was born. Most people thought I was his grandchild. He had been born in 1898. So it was, yes. So regrettably, he died when I was fairly young, so I don't remember I never had a chance to ask him all the things I would like to have asked him. But the interesting thing about the family journey is that he was the child of a man who was born in 1850. So there are these huge generation gaps, and I'm currently in the process of trying to trace them. I have them back to the mid 1700s, but there were just these very large generation gaps. He was the youngest of 12 children, 6 of whom did not live. Of them, I only knew, I guess, 2 of them who were quite elderly when I was born. I was the proverbial accident. But he was a man who gave me, I think, my dreams. You know, I remember as a very young child of something he said that I think has been a driver. He said something that I probably didn't understand. Then he said, "Well, I've always wanted to go on a tramp steamer around the Cape." Now, I have no idea what Cape he was talking about. Cape Horn, Cape of Good Hope, who knows? But the message was so clear, you know, get out of here, have an adventure, travel. And it stuck in my little 2 or 3 year old mind somehow. And, but, you know, I don't remember him looking like this. I think this was probably the man. You just showed an image of my mother. This was probably the man she married. And my mother was too old to have a child at that point. They didn't think she was pregnant. My grandmother insisted she was. So I exist because my grandmother refused to let them get rid of me, thinking I was a tumor.
Let's go to the photograph of Elizabeth's mom.
Yeah.
So they were close in age, but
no, she was 10 years younger than he was.
I see. Okay.
Yeah, so there was there quite a gap here. But it was actually 5 years. She was born in 1903. So, you know, they were not intended to have a child at this point. But so in many ways, I look at what I got from each of them. My mother, I had the good fortune that she lived until she was 92. So I knew her quite well. Oh. And she died about 25 years ago. And, but she was, I think my mother was, for a woman born in 1903, was born a feminist. Mm-hmm. She was determined that she was going to have a career. She wanted to be a lawyer, but she told me, well, then you couldn't go to law school. Well, you probably could if you were rich and lived in the East, but she wouldn't have known that. So she became a teacher because she thought she only had 2 options, being a teacher or a nurse. Mm-hmm. And she preferred to be a teacher. Her brothers told stories about how she would line them all up and make them sit down as if they were in school so she could play teacher when they were little. But she wound up teaching, supporting at least two of her brothers through college.
Where?
And, pardon?
Where, in what area?
Well, at that point, she was living in Texas, in Dallas. Oh. And she supported them through college and then taught her entire career. She didn't retire until she was in her mid 70s. Mm-hmm. But by then she had moved to New York City. My father had long since passed away, and she had married a man who I quite loved, and they were living in New York City. So I was always very glad she chose to leave Texas for New York City. It made me extremely happy. But she was one of the first people in my life who I think really in many, many ways, let me see the situation that women were often in. I remember her one night saying to my father, again, I was very little, I'm probably 5 maybe. And I remember overhearing her say, well, they say they're going to pay the men more than the women because they supported family. What the blank do they think I do? And I remember thinking, oh, that's interesting. And obviously, I remember it a lot of years later. But she was a very, mother wasn't a dreamer like my father. I don't think she had the interest in literature or many things that he was talking to me about going to college when I was 5 years old. Because all his sisters had gone, even though he didn't get to go. But she was very much the independent person who, managed to raise me as a single parent, support us, and go and have an adventure. And, when she was 80, she was traveling and in Hong Kong and having a wonderful time.
Wow. Well, we're going to see some photographs of you traveling. Let's go to the next image. So now this is you and your dad, or you and your stepdad?
Now this is me and my dad.
You and your dad and your mom.
And my mom.
And this is in Texas? Wow.
Yeah, this was taken in Texas.
Okay.
And I just have always liked this photograph because the two of them, it's kind of the only three people family photograph I have. Obviously, I was not particularly happy about the situation as I'm trying to eat whatever this is in my hands.
And did you come from a family with lots of photographs? Did your
no, it was fun when you asked us to do this because I started looking back at some of the few pictures I have from my father's family and trying to figure out who the heck these people are. Because, they were clearly taken around the turn of the century and the last century. So. Yeah. But I probably have 5 or 6 pictures of my father altogether. A few more of my mother because she lived long enough that I and my stepsisters took a lot of pictures of her. Okay. But I've just always liked this picture. I think it was in front of my grandmother's house.
Beautiful, beautiful photograph. Very elegant. Let's go to the next image. Okay, now we're jumping across time, and is that where are you here?
We were on a boat in the Mekong. So my husband and I have traveled a lot. We love to travel, and so this was a wonderful day. And I don't even know who took the picture, but we were obviously having a very good time. It was a remarkable trip. We had gone to Vietnam, Cambodia, Thailand, and Myanmar, Burma on this trip. And this is it was a wonderful day. And I think those of us that grew up during the Vietnam War, to be on the Mekong it's very evocative because, all you knew were these stories. And, suddenly you're in a place where your lives were very much shaped by the stories about it, even though you weren't there.
Let's go to the next image. I love that. This beautiful boat. So this is obviously another part of the world.
Yeah, this is a trip. We made several trips to Greece, and I've always loved Greece. I spent a great deal of time when I was in graduate school studying and writing about Greek drama. So it was a wonderful. I've gone several times, and it was just a very, very nice day and one of the adventures that we really enjoyed together.
I was going to ask you about your travel and how it impacted your work, or vice versa, your work leading you to these different places.
I've been fortunate that my work has taken me a lot of places, and I love to travel. So I think it's one of the great treats of my life is to be able to. So I suppose it's living out my father's vision of the tramp steamer around Cape Horn. I very carefully went to both Capes just to say, I don't know which one you wanted to go to, but I'm here.
I love that. Let's go to the next photograph.
This is Bagan in Myanmar. And we were fortunate enough that we were able to go to Myanmar between tragedies. I mean, we were there after the horrible events of the White Bridge, but we were certainly before the awful things that are happening there now. And we were very fortunate to be able to stay with the U.S. Representative there. We don't have ambassador, didn't have a consul there, and to travel. And when there really weren't Americans there. I have some very funny pictures of my husband because he's, as you can see, fairly tall and blonde. And people wanted to take a picture of him with their children because they'd never seen anything like him. They had no interest in me whatsoever. I looked just like them. I was utterly uninteresting, but they would line him up with their children so that they could take a picture of him. But Begon was quite fascinating. We were really the only tourists there at that point.
But it seems like at least your husband will be in a lot of family albums.
Oh yeah, we have lots of travel pictures because we do love to have them.
Wow, this is beautiful. Well, thank you so much for sharing. And I went before you go. Do you credit your mom for the kind of work you're doing in the academy and your pioneering work that you've done?
Well, very much. I credit my mother with my love of storytelling. When I was little, she belonged to a group that told stories in the parks and told stories in various areas around the city to children. And she would take me with her. And occasionally she told one about I don't know what it was, a rabbit. And she had a hat and the rabbit came out of the hat. And I got to put the rabbit out of the hat. I was about 6. But I loved the idea of storytelling. And I think very much from her, that because she really spent time, that her pleasure was stories and telling stories and hearing stories.
And this last image actually talks about your, the work that you've done, amazing work that you've done.
Well, this is my family. So you talk about families of choice. This is very much my family of choice.
Wow. And just tell us, for those who don't have a context, what exactly is happening in this image?
Well, we got a star. We have one of the only 2 stars, Hollywood Walk of Fame stars, that are not in Hollywood. So we have one and Disneyland has one. And so this was the day we were installing it.
Wow. I love it. Dean DALEY, thank you so much for sharing some of your family photographs and story, and also for hosting us.
Well, thank you. You made me go back through a lot of albums and find a lot of memories. So it's been a great journey for me. Thank you, Thomas.
Yeah, and you're one of the few people I think who has the claim of having a father who was born a century and a half ago almost. So it's pretty amazing. Okay. Thank you so much, Dean DALEY. So our next guest is Daria Yudakovsky. Welcome.
Hi, Thomas.
How are you, Daria?
I'm great. How are you?
I am doing well, thank you. I'm so glad you're here, and thank you for hosting us with Vision and Voices.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm excited to be here and to have you. So thank you.
Let's start with your first image.
Okay, great. So, well, for those who don't know, I direct Visions and Voices, right? So I am kind of sharing my journey and trajectory of what it is that brought me here tonight. And so this first image that I'm sharing is a picture of me and my mom. I would say I was probably about 3 or 4 years old. And, you asked us to share, people who've influenced us in our lives and how we kind of got to where we are. And so the thing about my mom is she passed away when I was quite young. So she actually passed away when I was 7 years old. And this is probably, a few years before that. And I have to say that I feel like it's really her absence that impacted me, right? That influenced me. I feel like she's a huge part of who I am today. But it was, I don't remember this image. And really the only kind of memories I have of my mom are photos, are pictures, as opposed to actual experiences. And I find that really valuable. So I really appreciate that you are having us go through our family history in this way. But yeah, I mean, I feel like, yeah.
You have no idea where this image was taken, or was there as well?
I'm gonna guess it's Monterey because that's where I'm from and grew up, and we have beautiful beaches in Monterey. And so I'm gonna guess that this is where I'm from. But I think that, yeah, you know, having lost her at such a young age, I think it's really made me kind of very independent and strong, and it's really had a huge impact on who I am today. And you know, I'm also I'm mixed. I'm half Japanese and half white, and you know, kind of losing that Japanese side of me, visibly, and my family was also, I think, a big influence on who I became.
Your mom's eyes are so present, you know, in this photograph.
Yeah, I agree. You know, actually, I have a friend who's a writer now, and she and I went to high school together. And I posted this picture on Facebook at Mother's Day, and she made a comment about like the gentleness and strength of her hand, like the way she's holding me. And I mean, I just found it incredibly moving because I think that there is something about that, the eyes and the way she's holding me.
As if she's peering into the future. Let's go to the next image. Oh my goodness. I've seen this image before, but it's a stunning image.
Well, it's so funny because my sister has been doing all this work going through all of these old photos, and she was just doing this, so this was kind of perfect. And she just gave me all these old photos and things that she found, and within it was this, you know, all of my class pictures from growing up. So this is my my second grade class, and it was this time in my life is actually really important to me. So I am in the very top right corner.
That's what I get.
And I think for a couple reasons. So Mrs. Wilson, I remember her so vividly. She was my very favorite teacher that I ever had in elementary school.
Is she the lower left?
On the lower left, yes. And I did not like the principal though, who was on the lower right, and I don't remember his name at all. But Mrs. Wilson, I absolutely loved. And she, I think it's a couple things. So 1978 is the year that my mom passed away. And I think that she knew what I was dealing with and going through, and like cared for me and nurtured me like she was another mom. And then, so, I mean, I think she just had this huge impact on me. And then the other thing is that, you know, some of the things that are really important to me are issues around, you know, equity and anti-racism. And I bring all this to the work that I do with Visions and Voices. And as you can see, you know, I'm in a class of predominantly white students, right? And there was a few students of color, but I think being mixed myself kind of heightened my difference. And I think it was around this time that people started asking that question, like, well, what are you? You know, or where are you from? Or no, where are you really from? And so I think that really started to make me be aware of what it meant to be a person of color, but not even just like Asian American or Japanese American, but, you know, being mixed within that. And so also having Mrs. Wilson, who was Black, like that, seeing that difference too. I mean, there were no Black students, and I just looked up to her so much. So I think that all of this had like a really huge impact on the way I thought about race and ethnicity.
Wow. Let's go to the next image.
Yes. So jumping ahead a little bit. So here I am. This is right after I graduated from high school. And I actually, it kind of represents me getting into the arts. So I started playing violin when I was in 4th grade. And I played violin, you know, very actively throughout elementary school and junior high and high school. And in high school, I got the opportunity to go to a private school for high school on scholarship. And after we graduated, we got to take our high school musical on tour. So this is me with some of my classmates and fellow performers in London, where we were performing The Wiz.
The Wiz.
And The Wiz. He's on down the road. And it was so much fun. I really loved this experience. And this kind of just really represents to me like how the arts became so critical to me, so important to me. Another thing is like, I had just graduated from high school, right? And I was getting ready to start college. And I will admit, I know I'm at USC now, but I went to UCLA as an undergrad. And, I was going to be entering as an economics major. Don't ask me why, but that's all I knew. But I was in London and I went to see the Tate Gallery, and I saw these like paintings that just moved me so much. And I was like thinking so vividly about how the arts can be transformative and really impact you. And I actually decided during this trip that I wanted to change my major to art history.
Wow.
So like, playing in the orchestra, playing in the like, musical and the theater, and being with my friends, and who, by the way, are predominantly white, and still thinking about race and ethnicity and all of this. And then also like just the kind of connection to the arts, visual arts and theater and music was all really important to me.
Let's go to the next image. And
Okay. Yes, what?
no, I was just going to say, I love those boots.
I know, I wish I still had them. So this is just me in college, and I just kind of I don't have too much to say about it other than this is me and my amazing sister Naomi, who is 8 years older than I am, and my cat Sydney, who was named after Sid Vicious. And she was actually visiting me while I was at UCLA, and I just kind of wanted to show a photo of who I was, and this is me being artsy and alternative and into music, and I think it's actually very much still who I am.
Let's go to the next image. So these are the Bruin days.
Those are my Bruin days. So this is actually my gaucho days.
Okay.
So I just had the one photo at UCLA, but this is when I was graduating from UC Santa Barbara with my master's degree in art history. And it's funny, I couldn't find a lot of photos from my Santa Barbara days, but they were also really important. So I went to grad school in art history, and it was really during my time in Santa Barbara that kind of I sharpened my focus and interest around issues around, race, ethnicity, gender. I remember being one of very few people of color in my grad school program, my department, and being in classes where the professor would say, well, Daria, you as the person of color in this room, what do you think? Like, what's your perspective on it? Because I was the only one to give it. I also remember, wanting to write my master's thesis about Asian American women artists and being told, but do you really have to, this was my advisor at the time, and she was this really wonderful, brilliant woman, but do you really, there really are no good Asian American women artists. And I was like, yes, there are. And so it really kind of, pushed me towards thinking about issues around representation. And also kind of pushed me towards thinking beyond just visual art and art history. And I became very interested in kind of larger issues of representation. And so actually after graduating, I don't have any pictures of this, but I continued on in Santa Barbara for a while. I got my first professional job at the Multicultural Center at UC Santa Barbara. And that experience was incredible for me. I did programming, and I worked with faculty, and I had Zavini Marcus, who was my supervisor and mentor, and she just really helped to continue to shape who I am and continue my work in higher ed and the arts and social justice.
Yeah, and it seems like if we go to the next photograph, that these images start getting a lot more diverse, if you will.
Right.
Speaking of representation, so this looks like a card. So why did you bring this collage of images?
Yeah, so I didn't make this. This was made by my students and staff when I left my next job. So again, I couldn't find any photos from my next job after UCSB. I left Santa Barbara because, well, first of all, I met the man who is now my husband, who lived in LA, and I moved to LA, and I got this job at Cal State LA as the director of their cross-cultural centers, which included all of the, student resource centers, including the Women's Resource Center, but also like the Asian Pacific American Student Resource Center and the Black Student Resource Center and the Chicano Student Resource Center. And so I did leave eventually to come to USC. And when I left, my students and my staff made me this really amazing card. You can't tell there, but it's like an 11 by 17 card with photos. And yeah, I mean, this is my family. This is like, you know, I loved them all so much. It was so amazing to work with them. And I mean, Cal State LA, the students there don't take anything for granted. And it was just such an incredible experience to work with these people. This is my family, you know, that I worked with during this time. And I still am connected with a number of the people that I worked with at Cal State LA.
And the next photograph, it's you and your daughter. And
so,
yeah, so this is at a march, the Women's March?
The Women's March. This is the 2017 Women's March. And so my daughter looks very different from that now, 4 years later. But this, you know, in the original incarnation of tonight's event, there was a question about like, what is the image that represents the real you? And I feel like this is that image for me. I am, you know, here at the Women's March, which really represents, you know, my interest in activism, in feminism, and anti-racism, and, you know, the signs that we're holding. I'm carrying a sign that has a quote by Audre Lorde, who's, you know, the self-identified, you know, Black lesbian warrior, poet, mother, whom I admire immensely. And this idea of intersectionality, right, which is so critical to me. And then with my daughter, who's holding this other sign, which has a little reference to the Riot Girl movement, and I'm very much also inspired by, you know, this punk rock feminist music movement and music and art movement. And my daughter just gives me so much hope for the future. So being a mother to her, you know, participating in activism together, I think that this is what means the world to me.
Wonderful. Bringing it full circle. So next image is an image of, what is this next image?
Let's see. Oh yeah. Okay, so I'm here, this is USC, this is now.
Okay.
So
yes, USC Visions and Voices. So this is, yes, tell us.
So yeah, so I was hired to launch this program, Visions and Voices, and we're now in our 16th year. This was a photo from our kickoff event this year in August called Spark, and it's something that we do every year. It was the first event that I ever did at USC, you know, when we launched this initiative in, you know, 2006. And, you know, it's something that we do just for our students during the welcome experience. And this was kind of insane because we were asked to put this event on. We didn't know whether we were going to be able to do events in person. And this was something that we put together in about 3 weeks to kick off the new year. And about 5,000 students came out to start off their year with Visions and Voices in the arts. And I don't know, it's just something that really kind of captures, I feel like, what I do here at USC. There's a student in the foreground there that has one of the bags that we were giving away that night. We were doing some screen printing, and it has this quote.
And it's Arts Everywhere? I was just trying to read it.
It's by Frank Ocean, and it says, "Arts, everything we hope life would be."
I love that.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, we have.
This is why we do it, for the students. Yeah.
One last image, and tell us why you chose to include this last image.
So I mean,
close out your story.
Yeah, I mean, I just felt like, you know, this is me today, and this is actually just from a month ago at our Trojan Family Weekend concert that we organized, and you know, I feel so honored and privileged to do the work that I do. I have an amazing group of people that I do it with, but, you know, doing this work and bringing the arts to the larger community, I mean, it just gives me so much joy. And so here I am doing the welcome and introduction at a concert and conversation that we presented with the Psychedelic Furs. It's something we did for Trojan Family Weekend when the parents come. And so the idea is that, you know, we're trying to give them a sense of what a Visions and Voices event might be like. very close to my own heart as a child of the 80s. And I actually forgot to mention this, but in the picture in London, I was wearing a Psychedelic First t-shirt. So the fact that I got to present them over 30 years later is really amazing. But you know, we had about 4,000 people come out for this event, and the idea that we get to do work that brings the community together through music and through the arts is really, really rewarding for me.
And you have many supporters in the chat too, so it's working really, really well. And I love the you know, this ending with this image, you know, and thinking about your mom looking, you know, and her vision looking forward, and you know, just what a wonderful story. Thank you so much, Daria, for sharing.
Thank you, Thomas.
Okay, so now we are going to, I wanted to thank Michael, Elizabeth, and Daria. Those were wonderful shares. And we're going to take just a break to invite our audience to think about sharing their stories with us in January. Here's a short video to get your thoughts flowing from our roadshow at Skidmore College. Let's roll the tape, please, Alex.
My name is Dorothea Truffleman. I'm a student at Skidmore College. I'm from Katona, New York in Westchester County. And I'm here to talk about this photo of my family. It's my father, myself, my mother, and my older sister. It was taken the summer of 2011 in Berlin. That's us in front of the Brandenburg Gate. I've been thinking about the meaning of a family photograph and its purpose and what we want to tell when we show. I think that there's such a thing as an expiration date of a photograph, kind of like a flower in a vase. Like, it was beautiful, it served a purpose at one point, but it inevitably, with time, wilts and needs to be replaced. Thinking back now, I can only barely remember it, even though it was only 4 years ago. My mom, her jaw's smiling, but it's also clenched in pain as her cartilage in her knee has been worn out. My father, also smiling, but below that smile is the discomfort still of being a Jew in Germany. I remember the least about what I was feeling going into my senior year of high school, thinking about what I'm guessing were little things like, you know, the boy that I was seeing that summer, maybe where I'd go to college, prom already, you know, months before it would come. What makes this photo kind of the privileged one that gets to go with me to Skidmore, to the suburbs of Washington, D.C., to the depths of Havana, Cuba. It's been more places than most people have gone in their lives, and I think maybe it's time to be replaced, to tell a different truth.
Okay, welcome back. So we're going to our next special guest, SLAVA GREENBERG. SLAVA is a postdoctoral teaching fellow at USC School of Cinematic Arts, whose research explores the potential of media forms to offer transformative experiences in reference to disability studies, trans studies, and gender studies. SLAVA, welcome. How are you?
Great, Thomas. How are you?
I'm doing great, thank you. So let's go to your first image.
Yeah, this is the oldest image, the oldest photograph that I have. It's not a great shot of it because it's also from everything concealing it. So it's you can barely see it, but in the middle here are my great-great-grandfather and grandmother. They're my grandmother's great parents, Hannah Katz and Itzhak Katz. And this photo was taken in 1914, and the back of it is a letter to, this is their children, 10 of them, and 2 other children who left, this is Ukraine, and they left for the US to New York, and this was sent to them as sort of a good, something to remember the family by, and to keep with them. And my great grandfather in the middle of the photo here went to visit them a couple of years before World War II, wanted to join them in New York, but he felt that he couldn't fit in. He felt pressured to shave his beard off, which he was probably too attached to. So he sailed back to Ukraine only years later to be killed in Babi Yar during the Holocaust, along with one of his daughters and granddaughters, because he also didn't want to go on the evacuation train because he felt that everything's going to be okay and nothing's going to happen. So he made a few wrong choices along the way. And so I think he's sort of a symbol for me to also know about better timing and when and where to immigrate, perhaps.
And did you immigrate as well? Is that part of your story?
Well, immigration has been part of my story and the story of my family, of multiple immigrations along the way. And I guess I'm still in movement and can't really define it in one way yet.
Well, let's go to the next photograph.
Yeah, so this is me in Kiev. I'm not sure how old I am here, but this is in the summer house that my grandparents had outside of Kiev. This is where we spent all our summers. And I was also playing in the yard here when I was 3, when the Chernobyl accident happened, and which wasn't that far away. And while playing, and we didn't know what was happening, and I started bleeding from my nose for about a week. And then some of my family, we left for Moscow. My dad stayed in Kiev during the days of the radiation. And he, as a lot of the men his age, had different heart conditions. And years after that, he had his first heart attack. And that's the next photo of us going on this place where the country had sent him to recuperate, and sort of, it's like a health resort for people who had heart attacks. And on the left, that's my grandmother. So all the photos that are the black and white photos, or most of them, are photos that she either took or developed. She was a photographer.
Oh, wow.
And
this is her all the way to the left.
Yeah.
Was that unusual for a family photographer, and to be the kind of matriarch?
I think the unusual thing was having a private business in a communist country. I think was the unusual. She taught herself everything. She went and stayed with another woman who was a photographer who taught her the job, and she had a room in room next to her kitchen that was one dark room, and she had the bathroom in her house was also her second lab. And that's why I loved coming to take showers there, because I could swim in red light while she's telling me stories, developing photos.
So was that her main source of income?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Yeah. And she taught me how presentation is everything. And a lot of the stories of it's how I present the photos to the clients is what matters, and not the actual photo. So I think that's where I get it from.
Awesome. Also, and who is this? This is you in the
Yeah, so this is me and my dad and my mom. And we have a lot of photos from that day of my brother was there too. He's not in the photo of sailing. It was a beautiful day and a beautiful visit. And you can't tell that the story behind it is actually the fact that my dad was very ill, and this is where he started, his heart started giving up, and it was just the beginning of what is to come.
Let's go to the next photograph.
Yeah.
So around the same time, or?
Yeah, so this is a bit later. I don't know which one of those. It was a thing that my grandmother would do every year, was just she would have us pose for these photos once a year, so that she can send it to the family on New Year's. And this particular one is different than the rest because this was the last one before we left for Israel, and my grandparents had stayed in Kiev. And so I think it's a bad photo, but if when you look at the actual physical one, you can see that my grandmother's eyes are all teary and red, and that we are posing, but it's just performing this this photograph for my grandmother because she asked us to, but very anxious toward what is to come and the separation from my grandparents, and especially my grandmother, who was a very important part of my life.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And your dad is wearing his favorite sweater, the same sweater he's wearing.
Yeah.
Yes.
I think they were trying to match us in the photo, to have, like, I'm wearing this dress that is like the same sweater that my dad's sweater is wearing.
Okay, wow. So let's go to the next image, which is an image taken in Israel.
Well, actually, this is Jordan.
Oh, this is Jordan. Okay.
But just to say that image, the last image was before we moved to Israel, and then my grandparents joined us 2 years later, and then a year later, my dad had a heart attack that he died of. So they eventually did only get to have another couple of years with him when they did eventually join us.
I see. Okay. Is your dad in this photograph?
No. This photograph is it's a group called Seeds of Peace. You can't really read the t-shirts. Mm-hmm. It's a summer camp that I went to. I started going to when I was 16.
Much younger people here, yes.
Yeah. Was so the camp is in the US, but we, at least before the Intifada, we went to Jordan every year, and this is one of the trips that we were able to have together, Palestinians and Israelis and Jordanians and a couple of Egyptians, and this became impossible only a few years after.
Mm-hmm. What seeds did this gathering sprout? Any seeds sprout out? What are the relationships? Do you still have relationships with?
Oh yeah, some of the people in this particular photo I'm still close friends with.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Let's go to the next photograph.
Yeah, so this is Mexico, Leon, UNIFEM forum on it was a bunch of things, but specifically this panel was about gender-based violence in different war zones. So it's me and a friend from Gaza, a participant from Rwanda and from Guatemala. talking about different aspects of gender-based violence in our regions and how we can collaborate through solidarity.
Is that you in the jeans there?
Yeah.
Okay. What year was this?
This is 2010.
Okay. Let's go to the next image. Now, this is a photograph of testosterone, and it's also a kind of a self-portrait in a way, isn't it?
Yeah, it was when I finally got my prescription and I got my testosterone as part of gender reassignment treatment. I was obviously very happy, and I posted this on my social media, but also so that I can remember the date, because I knew that otherwise I would never remember. But also it was part of a way of raise awareness and talk about access to gender-based care.
Mm-hmm. The expiration on the bottle says March 2021.
Yeah.
When was it? When was this photograph?
Yeah, so I don't, it was 2018, I guess, but I don't remember the date. That makes me a bad trans person. I should, you know, tattoo it on myself somewhere, but maybe sometime.
I love the photograph. It's such a powerful image. Okay, and let's go to the next image.
So this is my partner and love of my life, Revital Kishinevsky. And this is one of the invites to one of our many, many goodbye parties of moving around so much. So this is the last one before coming here to USC. So this is a self-designed, enhanced Boomer Productions invite, and the background is from BoJack Horseman.
Wow, I love it.
And that's Sasha in the middle.
And that's Sasha. Is Sasha still with you?
Yeah.
Okay, so now the next and last slide is at USC. We're going back to the star.
So this is January 2020. I took this photo, very excited to start my journey at USC. And then the next time I saw this star was probably 15 months later, I guess.
Wow. Well, thank you so much for sharing your stories, Slava, and
thank you, Thomas.
The many journeys of your family, you know, and your own as well, in so many different, you know, dimensions. So it's really wonderful to spend time with you. Okay, so now we have our next guest, who is Dr. RONALD McCurdy, Assistant Dean of the Justice, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Committee and Professor of Music at the USC Thornton School of Music. Ron, welcome. How are you?
I'm doing fine, Thomas. Thank you so much. And boy, I'm really enjoying hearing all these wonderful stories. This is amazing.
Yeah, isn't it wonderful? It is wonderful. It's and your images, you know, also are great. They're going to take us into a part of America that we haven't been to yet. let's start with the first image.
All right. Well, this is my mother and father, Dorothy and Charles McCurdy. They had just moved to Belgrade, Florida in 1944.
Belgrade, Florida.
Belgrade, which is right below Lake Okeechobee, South Florida, about 40 miles west of West Palm Beach and about 80 miles north of Miami.
Okay.
And Belgrade was one of these migrant towns. In fact, there were several towns: Belgrade, Pahokee, Clewiston, and the Black population was fairly large there because it was a migratory town, and the soil was quite fertile. So sugarcane, corn, beets, celery, you name it, it grew there. So the town required cheap labor. So when my father and mother moved there,
And they don't look like they're necessarily migrants. I mean, they're very stylish, and yeah, with the suits and the beautiful dress.
Well, they were. In fact, both my parents were educators. My father was became a high school principal, and my mother taught third grade. And this is what brought them to Belgrade.
I see. They're children of migrants.
Well, my father was one of 8 children. His parents didn't go beyond the 5th grade, and but he managed to go to college where he met my mother. They married, and of course, they both went into education. But when they moved to Belgrade, the schools for Black students didn't go beyond the 5th grade, and it was Mary McLeod Bethune who knew Eleanor Roosevelt and lobbied her to go to her husband FDR to allocate funding to allow the Black schools to go to the 12th grade. So it wasn't until 1955 that Lakeshore High School emerged, and my father became the principal of that school.
Well, let's go to the next image. So is this an image of your dad as principal?
Yes, that's my father's principal. And he was a taskmaster, but he was the person who I think really instilled in me and my siblings the need to work hard. You know, I mean, he grew up in the height of Jim Crow, and life was not very good for him and not good for his siblings. And I mean, it was a struggle for all Black folks at that time. So he made sure in our house, it wasn't a matter of if we were going to college, but where. He understood how important education was. He even started a night school program because he thought that he needed to not only educate the students of Belgrade, but also their parents. So he was really pro-education. And I think this is probably where that whole education bug bit me, because I saw how selfless he was in making sure that everyone had an equal shot at education.
And that's a large part of your story we're going to come to.
Yes.
But there's the next image is such a beautiful image. Is this an image that was in your family album? Is this something you found and you know,
this is something that I found because this was Belgrade in the early 1940s.
Okay.
And this is how, I mean, it was very Spartan living accommodations, no electricity, no running water, outhouses. And this is kind of where poor Black folk, even poor whites had to live, because I mean, it was both poor whites and Blacks were the migrants who worked in the fields and what have you. But yeah, but this is sort of an example of how people lived initially.
Let's go to the next image.
This is just an image of Belgrade and how you see people doing the very painstaking work of harvesting the crops. And again, like I said, it was cheap labor, but and many of my classmates that I went to school with, their parents did this work, and then and sadly many of them end up following the same footsteps. However, there were quite a few who did not have to do this. There were several who did end up going to college and did well for themselves. But you can see just how vast the farmland is in this town. And this was just one of perhaps hundreds of thousands of acres of land where there were crops that were being harvested.
So I think that area was covered or portrayed in Harvest of Shame.
Exactly.
Yeah, 1961.
Yes.
Let's go to the next image.
Wow. This is my mother. My mother is the 4th one to the left, wearing the dark dress in the middle.
Okay, with the belt.
Dorothy McCurdy, and she was teaching at an elementary school called Rosenwald Elementary School. And you might know that name because Julius Rosenwald was one of the original people who owned Sears and Roebuck's, and he put his money where his mouth was. He built schools all over the South for poor areas, and Rosenwald Elementary is where my mother taught for most of her career.
And and this is the next image, is an image of, looks family. Are those your siblings?
These are my siblings. My brother Peter on the left, my sister Carol, and my sister Reva, and that's me on the far right. And we were in town for dedication of a building that was named after my father. I didn't tell one story. When finally integration came to our town in 1970, 71, which was my senior year in high school. And prior to that time, the South, Belgrade, we talked about, Louisiana. Well, Belgrade was very similar in terms of the segregation. And I remember growing up as a kid, we had one white doctor in town, Dr. Baker, and he had separate waiting rooms for his quote unquote colored patients and a separate waiting room for his white patients. And I remember the first time that I recognized that I was different, because I know my parents had done a phenomenal job of trying to insulate us from racism. But the white waiting room, it was air conditioned, and it had nice furniture and Life and Look magazines. But the colored waiting room was not air conditioned, had dilapidated furniture, and no magazines. And I remember about 6 years old saying, "Mom, let's sit over there. It's cooler over there." She said, "Well, no, baby, we can't sit over there." And I go, "Why not?" Finally she explained to me as I got older. But these are my siblings, and we're all still around now. And my oldest sister just had a birthday on Saturday, and she turned 72. I'm sure she won't want me to tell you all that, but she just turned 72. But she still looks good. She's still vibrant and still active, and celebrating her birthday for the entire month of November.
Was this a commemoration of your dad's?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. I also mentioned my father, when desegregation came to our town. My father had been principal for over almost 30 years, and he felt that he was going to be the heir apparent to the consolidated schools. And the way Brown versus the Board of Education rolled out in the South, it meant demolishing the Black schools, firing most of the Black teachers, and busing the Black kids over to what had been the white school. So my father thought that he was going to be principal, but the superintendent had a different idea. So my father, long story short, ended up suing the school board. In fact, it's a famous case, McCurdy versus Palm Beach County School Board. He sued, he won the first case, the county appealed, he won the appeal. But during that 4 years, in fact, this started when I was a junior in high school, and it was finally settled my junior year in college. My father was appointed principal sometime that summer, but just as school was about to start, he died of a heart attack. And I was 22 years old, going into my senior at FAMU. But that's but it was a tough time for our family, because he had been, the patriarch of our family, and he became bitter. He was stressed. He was drinking and just not taking care of himself, and it finally caught up with him. He died at age 62.
Wow, sorry. Let's go to the next image. This looks like almost like a father figure here.
Absolutely. This was my high school band director, Mr. Willie Pyfram, and he was like a second father to me. I would go to his house on weekends, mow his yard, and we would play duets on trumpet. And he'd play records, and we would just talk about music. So he was someone who was, and he's still alive. He's 85 years old right now. So he's still with us, and I talk to him
all the time. But let's go to another image. Now, this image was an image that was taken early. So this is part of your music education here.
Well, actually, I went to Florida A&M University, and my director there was William Patrick Foster, who was the dean of HBCU marching bands. And he had gone to Kansas, the University of Kansas, and I was the recipient of the William Patrick Foster Fellowship Award, which I went to grad school to get my master's and doctorate from Kansas. And now I'm a young professor. I was like probably 30, 32 years old on this picture, and we had the great Dizzy Gillespie as a great artist with our jazz program there. So I was a young. You can see how my afro was kind of nice and coiffed. No more afro here, Thomas. My afro's gone.
Let's go to the next image. So why did you include this image, Ron?
I spent 20 years while at FAMU. I was chosen to be a part of the All-American College Band program that the Walt Disney Company had. In fact, Dr. Arthur Bartner, who was just retired from USC, the Trojan Band director for 50 years, he was my director in the program at Disney World in 1974. I went on to be the director of that program myself, and the guy who founded that program was a guy by the name of Bob Yanni. That name, some people may know that name. He was the guy who founded the Electric Light Parade that was at Disneyland and Disney World. But he had a vision for this program, and the program was to give college students an edge on their careers in music. And I took his dream, his vision, and developed a whole curriculum. We performed at the park, but we were also in class 5 days a week for 2.5 hours, where we talked about the business of music, entrepreneurship, big idea projects. So this project, this particular program, it was very near and dear to my heart. In fact, I just stopped doing it just a couple, maybe 3 years ago. Wow. But I spent almost 20 years directing this program.
Wow, Awesome. And then this, our last image is, it looks like a headshot. Beautiful. Very well done.
Well, I've been blessed, because like I said, my parents were educators, and I knew early on that I wanted to be in music.
Yes.
I knew as a child I was going to be in music, but I didn't know I was going to be in education. But I think I got the teaching bug from my father, and I've had a chance to have the best of both worlds. I get to perform a lot, and I enjoy teaching it. And this is what brought me to USC. I was professor at the University of Kansas, the University of Minnesota, and then I came to USC and back in 1999 to be head of the Thelonious Monk Institute, and I did that for 2 years, and then I transitioned into being a professor, and I've thoroughly enjoyed my time here. I just enjoy being a Trojan.
Wow, awesome. Well, it's so good to spend time with you, Ron. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you, Thomas.
For amazing stories and your journey and the journeys.
Yeah.
So our next guest is VARUN SONI. And VARUN is a Dean of Religious Life at the University of Southern California. Welcome. How are you, VARUN?
Good. Thanks so much, Thomas. It's really a great pleasure to be here. And I got to say, as chaplain, I tell my students all the time, live your life story, write your own life story. You are the author of your own life story. What story are you telling yourself? I was really inspired by Joseph Campbell, who was a great scholar of mythology, who said we all have myths that we live by. In fact, George Lucas at USC Cinematic Arts School was so inspired by Campbell too. He endowed a chair after him. But I've never really put it into practice. I'm all talk, no action, Thomas. And I'm so grateful to you and others for really making me do that. And I think it's a great exercise for anyone to do. We talk about a life story, but what actually is our life story and how does it change over time? And what does that say about us? And so thank you for this opportunity.
Well, thank you. I couldn't have said it better. And I'm so glad to see the images that you brought. Let's start with the first one.
Oh, this one. Okay, so these are not in chronological order, and quite frankly, the memories that I have in my life aren't necessarily chronological. We remember things that might not be big moments; they're small moments potentially, but they're big events in our life. This is a picture of me when I graduated from college, and I spent a year traveling around India and the Himalayan regions to learn more about myself. I was Indian American growing up, the first generation to be sort of born and raised ethnically Indian and Hindu in the United States after the 1965 Immigration and Naturalization Act.
And where was that?
I grew up in the US, and we didn't have a lot of role models growing up. We had Deepak Chopra and Apu from The Simpsons, and that was it. And so much of my life was this sense of psychological dislocation, trying to figure out who I was as an immigrant. And this was me traveling through India. I took this picture. It looks like it's from the 30s, but it's not, in a hill station for a visa I was trying to get to go to Tibet. And after I took this picture, I spent 2 months traveling in Tibet with yak herders and sleeping in snow and doing things that I just couldn't imagine doing now. And I love this picture because it gives me a sense of adventure still. Like I was willing to do anything at any point. And that sense of freedom and thought and movement is really what I want from my students too. And also I had hair, which is nice to see. I was trying to grow glorious locks, but I think I failed in that.
Well, it feels like a halo in some way.
That's a good one.
Let's go to the next image. I love the image. Wow. So is this something you took, or is this an image?
No, this is an old picture we sort of inherited.
So this is before, this is
this is part of my family history. So in terms of the myths that my family lived by, it really starts with my great grandmother, Saraswati Soni, who was very close with Kasturba Gandhi, who was Mahatma Gandhi's wife, and she became one of the leaders of the Indian nationalist movements. And so my grandfather grew up around Mahatma Gandhi and Nehru,
this is a picture of Nehru.
And this is a picture of Nehru coming to visit my great-grandmother in Dehradun, the town we're from, after he became the first prime minister of an independent India. And that's my uncle touching his feet. And so, when I was growing up and I was struggling with what it means to be Indian American, my grandfather used to tell me, the father of the nation, Nehru, used to touch your grandmother's feet and call her mother. That gave me a sense of mission or pride and rootedness. And so this picture has always meant a lot to me.
Beautiful. Let's go to the next image.
This is my grandfather's the most important person in my life. My parents were young immigrants and physicians, and they didn't have a lot of time to raise us growing up. And so my grandfather moved to the United States, and he basically raised us. This is my grandfather. He taught outside of London for many years, and he was a teacher. He was a Buddhist. He was an artist. And I became a teacher and a Buddhist, and not really an artist, but he really inspired me. And I love this picture because so much of my life is about guru-disciple relationships or mentor-mentee relationships or student-teacher relationships. And that kind of joy that you see with teacher and student here is the kind of joy that I found in my own life in higher education. It's the reason why I do the work that I do at USC.
Powerful. Thank you. And the next image is also an image.
Yeah, it's my grandfather. So growing up in India, he used to dream about California because he used to watch these Western films. He wanted to be a cowboy, and like his dream, this solitary Indian kid who used to watch movies in British India, his dream is the reason why my entire family is here. The power of like a single dream of a boy. And so when he came to California and he got to wear cowboy hats and visit Western movie sets, and he was so proud when I joined USC because of its Hollywood history and the films that he loved and the actors he loved were all associated with USC. To me, this is his American dream.
And what is that to the bandana? Does that have any significance?
Yeah, I'm not entirely sure about that. He had his own look.
Okay, let's go to the next image.
Forward. So there's a long story here, but I'll try to tell you the short version. Okay. I was in Rio about 15 years ago, and I ran into this beautiful young woman at the time. She's from South Africa. I'm from the US, and our groups made a decision to meet each other and hang out some more. And I was really enthralled by her because my great-grandparents worked with Gandhi in India, and her great-great-grandparents had worked with Gandhi in South Africa. So here we are in Rio talking about Gandhi. It kind of blew my mind. And so the night I was supposed to meet her, me and my friends were staying in a house, and the short version of the story is we got sort of detained, held up at gunpoint with machine guns to our head. And it ended up being something different. We got caught up in a real estate dispute that we didn't know about, but I missed my first date with her. And so she was livid. She didn't want to meet again. I convinced her and her friends, just give us a chance. We were held up, honestly. She's like, I don't believe you. I don't trust Americans, etc. So the next night she finally was like, okay, I only have a few days left in Rio. We'll go out to dinner. And emboldened by this sort of experience, I had this carpe diem attitude, like I'm going to sweep her off her feet. I'm going to sweep her off her feet because I was really kind of enthralled. Sitting next to us was Fabio, who is a famous back in the day, like cover model, I guess you could say, for romance novels. And we had a great conversation with him, and he took some pictures with some friends afterwards. And then she's like, let me get a picture with him. My friends will get a kick out of it. And so I'm holding the camera. It was like 2005. So it was like maybe the first picture I ever took with a digital camera. And Fabio looks at her and says, let's make this one count. So before I even have a picture with her, I'm taking a picture of her and Fabio. And Fabio is like literally the guy on the cover of Romance. And I'm saying I have to sweep her off her feet. And meanwhile, Fabio is sweeping her off her feet. And I'm the one taking a picture. Later on, I'm telling this story to Norman Lear, who is a great film producer, legendary. And I said, Norman, look how happy she is. And he says she's happy because she likes what she's looking at, because she was looking at me taking the picture.
Yeah.
This is my wife. This was the first time we met. And so this story has a good ending, but it had a really treacherous beginning with Fabio.
Yeah. Okay, let's go to the next image.
So this is my family. And I like this picture because it's, my whole life I felt like Indian - American. That hyphen was a bridge, an obstacle, a wall, a barrier between my Indian and American identities. Growing up in the US, I always felt like I was Indian. And when I went to India, I always felt like I was American. I was like neither here nor there. At some point, that hyphen became the bridge between these identities. And this picture I love because it's my family, my parents, my brother and sister, us in the US, but, with our Indian, proud of our Indian heritage and our Indian community. And now that I'm a parent, I think when you're growing up, you look at your parents, and at least I was upset at all the things they didn't do. And now as a parent, I'm just super grateful for all the things they did do.
Let's go to the next photograph. It's a great image.
Yeah, so this is me and Steph. When I got to USC as the university's chaplain, people said, oh, the real religion on campus is football. And then I was like, that's funny, until I went to a football game and I'm like, yeah, you're right. Because I saw pilgrimage, I saw mythology, I saw ritual, I saw the intergenerational transmission of wisdom and people telling stories and wearing funny clothes and miracles and agony and ecstasy and all the things that you see in religion, I saw in Trojan football. And so we started a bunch of different spirituality and sports initiatives, and I helped start a production company called Religion of Sports with a good friend of mine. And I've gotten to hang out with some amazing people, including Steph. This is Steph and I on a golf course talking about how his jump shot is an act of devotion. And we ended up doing a Facebook episode on this. But it was a beautiful way for me at USC to bring the strengths of USC, which I've tried to do, like the film school and football and sports, into a spiritual conversation about how do these things that mean so much to us also give us a sense of meaning, purpose, and belongingness in the world, especially as we're entering an era where most students aren't raised with formal religion.
And the this next image looks like the new generation.
Yeah, that's my baby girl. That's Tenzin. We named her after our guru, His Holiness the Dalai Lama. This was the summer in Iceland. It just so happened she was on Rainbow Street wearing a rainbow jacket during Pride Week in Reykjavik. So this was I just love this picture, and fight on. She's like well trained in the USC ways with the hand gesture.
Next image. Is this you and your wife?
Me and my wife getting married in Durban, South Africa. I'm wearing traditional North Indian clothes. She's wearing traditional South Indian clothes. What I like about this is kind of what you don't see, which is her necklace and earring set. So when I got married, my father went to India. He went to Rajasthan, where I got engaged, and he went to a small jewelry shop, and he's like, "Oh, my son's getting married. I'll buy this nice necklace." And this was in a town which had thousands of jewelers. It's like the center of jewelry for the world. And he bought this necklace and brought it to Southern California. And 6 months later, her father was in India, walked into a small jewelry store and said, "Oh, my daughter's getting married. I'll buy her an earring set," and bought the earrings and brought them to South Africa. When we got married that morning, my dad and her dad met for the first time, and my dad presented this necklace she was wearing, and her dad presented these earrings that she's wearing. And it turns out that they were from the same small store in India. One had gone the way of Southern California. One had gone straight to South Africa, separated by 6 months, reunited on the morning of our wedding. And it just was like this beautiful kind of hidden hand thing that, you know, our families had never met. And we were so anxious about that, but something else kind of connected that made us feel like, yes, this was an act of faith, but the right act of faith. Well, at least I felt that way. I think she has probably more regrets, but.
Well, the next image is you with, wow, the Dalai Lama.
So I first met His Holiness the Dalai Lama when I was studying in college. I was in an abroad program living in a Buddhist monastery, once again, trying to figure out who I was and what my purpose was. And I met the Dalai Lama, and he changed my life. And I got to spend a lot of time with him, and I consider him my guru. And just like my grandfather got to hang out with Gandhi growing up, I got to hang out with the Dalai Lama. And so in 2011, I hosted him at USC, and I introduced him to my students. And I had met him as a college student, and then I got to introduce him to my college students. So for me, it was the full USC journey of my own college experience. This is in the locker room of the basketball team at the Galen Center. In the background, you can see Pico Iyer, who's a brilliant writer and has become a good friend and wrote a great biography of the Dalai Lama, one of my other heroes. And DeMar DeRozan, you can kind of see his jersey between the two of us. And so this is a great coming together of my guru, one of my favorite writers, sports as like a spiritual space. And it just turns out that the Dalai Lama's colors are kind of cardinal and gold. They're maroon and yellow, but they worked within this locker room.
Wow. So our last image, your last image, Varun. Wow, your wife and your daughter.
Yeah, my wife and my daughter at Diwali. This was a Diwali picture for her school day. Once again, just a way for us to celebrate our Indian heritage in the United States. And I just think of my daughter. I was growing up with a sense of psychological dislocation. My daughter is a Indian girl with Tamil heritage who sees a Tamil woman in the White House. Like her story in America, I don't think my grandfather, when he dreamt of Westerns, could have imagined his great-granddaughter would be growing up in a country where she saw herself in the White House. And that's kind of a beautiful culmination of our family story.
I love it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Thomas.
For sharing these great images. I look forward to further conversations. Okay, so we're running a little bit behind, so we're going to go immediately to CAMILLIA, SHOFANI.
Hi.
How are you, Camellia?
I'm good. Nervous.
You.
Yes.
Yeah, well, your images are really wonderful, and they taking us to yet another part of the world. Camellia is the project manager at Middle East Media Initiative at USC School of Cinematic Arts. So Camellia, tell us about this first image, which you're just about to see.
That's a photo of my great grandfather, Sam'an Shofani, taken around 1920 in Nazareth. He was martyred in a massacre during the establishment of the State of Israel called the Ailabun massacre, along with 12 other young men, one of which was my great grandfather. He was 16 years old. Sorry, my great uncle, who was 16. And so my grandfather would share stories about them and about that time period. He was never allowed to return after that due to the absentee property law. So he went to Jordan, married my grandmother, and then later immigrated to LA. So I just find this a beautiful photo of him, very striking, his cheekbones, his hatta, which is traditional, his pinstripe blazer. Yeah.
It's such a power. It's almost like it has a quality of a drawing.
Yeah.
As well. Let's go to the next image. It's such an amazing story. Is this your dad?
No, this is my Mexican grandfather. So my father's Palestinian and my mother's Mexican. And this is a photo of my grandfather, Cesario. He was part of the Bracero program. So he came to work 6 months out of the year at strawberry farms, picking oranges, that sort of thing, and then go back to his family in Michoacan. He also held a lot of other types of jobs during that period, but yeah, this was his first time in the U.S.
I see. And let's go to the next image. Is this part of his family?
Yeah. So I chose this photo. This is a photo that you had to take if your family was coming to visit field workers, like their husbands. You have to take it as a family if everyone was under the age of 13, which they were. That's my mother in the middle. She's the tiny one. And it was taken in Tijuana right before they were about to cross the border and eventually moved. They'd settle in Venice in the early 70s. And I just love this photo. I mean, my grandmother looks exhausted, stressed. And I don't know, I always feel like the way I live my life is always like an ode to the women that couldn't live, Yeah, that's the hairstyle too. That couldn't live the way, I do, but it's a beautiful photo of them.
Yeah. And let's go to the next image. And who's in this image?
That's me and my father. This was the first time we met. It was taken, the photo in the LA Times. He was at the Gulf War when I was born. He was a Marine, which later came to influence sort of, in a long story, but like my anti-war politics eventually. He also was deployed in 2002, 2003, 2004. So growing up post 9/11 as like an Arab American was interesting and polarizing in a lot of ways.
Yeah. So you spent a lot of time apart during those early years.
Yeah, most of them.
Wow. Next image.
So I grew up with a very young family, a very rowdy family. They were all in their 20s. They didn't really know what they were doing. So I grew up with a lot of, 90s backyard house parties. There's me in the middle of the revelry. And those are some of them are my dad's siblings. Some of them are my mom's siblings. It's my mom in the middle there in the blue. And that's how it was. It was just a very loud and noisy childhood, but fun. Yeah.
And both sides, kind of Middle East and Mexican.
Yeah, and they were all very close. Actually, that uncle right behind me and the aunt to the left used to date for a bit. My mom's sister and my dad's brother took each other out for prom. So yeah, everyone was very much always together and having a good time.
Sounds like a true LA story.
It really, yeah.
Neighborhood story. Next image.
So here's my chosen family. That's my little sister. Well, she's not my chosen family, but that's my little sister in the middle. And these are friends I've had for over 10, some of them 20 years, who've impacted me, challenged me creatively, intellectually. And yeah, I love them. Actually, one of them to the right just became a professor at USC of anthropology, studying migration. All the way to the right with the blue shirt.
Okay, and what's her name?
Fiore Brahane, Professor Fiore Brahane.
I love it. I love it.
Yeah.
And then we have our last image, which is this so amazing, an amazing image. When was it taken?
It was taken 2 years ago, actually. While I was working for USC for MEMI, it was like 6 weeks on the job. We had to go to Cairo and put together a few events, pitch form at the Cairo Film Festival. It's cliche. It was the most family-friendly photo I could find that, I guess, represents me. But I mean, I love to travel, and I'm very close with my Middle Eastern heritage in general. And so, yeah, this is me alone on the trip.
Yeah, well, maybe I just was, one of my films was shown at the Cairo Film Festival through a lens darkly in 2015, and I wasn't able to go, and it's one of my big regrets that I was not able to go to the Cairo Film Festival, and I won an award there, you know.
Oh, really? Congrats.
Yeah, so I was just like, ah, and so when I see this picture and I read a little bit about it, it's just, yeah, it made my heart ache a little bit. Congratulations, and thank you so much for sharing the journey of your family. It's just like I've not heard this particular journey before.
Thank you
So much, CAMILLIA. So next we're going to Maddox. Maddox Pennington is a lecturer at USC and a non-binary writer, professor, and playwright originally from the Cherokee Nation. Welcome, Maddox. How are you?
Thank you so much. Good, thank you.
Let's start with your first image, which these images are just so stunning. Let's go to the first image and tell us about when this image was taken and how it was passed down to you.
So my great grandmother is the one in the lighter blanket on the right, and these are her older and younger sisters. They were Cherokee Choctaw Indians, and they lived in Muldrow, Oklahoma. This came to me through, I think, if you're lucky, you have one person in your family who is like the keeper of the genealogy and the photos. And so this is like a photo from a cell phone of a photo. But I think it was taken also against a backdrop of one of my grandmother's quilts, which is cool. So I love this because it places them in what we like historically think of as Native people, even though this was probably taken in like 1908. This was them playing dress up. There's another picture that I don't know if we'll get to, but I like that it places them in that history, but then also like I knew my great grandmother. She died when I was 3 or 4, but I knew her and she knew me. So the idea of, somebody said in the chat, of family connecting to history with a capital H, and the idea that I can trace this Native ancestry, from people who look like me and dress like anybody else, back to people who would have had blankets and dressed up and gone to powwows and gathered in these kind of historically resonant and very aesthetically pleasing ways. It's just exciting for me.
Yeah. I mean, I could see them playing with their, but also just like enjoying it, So let's go to the next image.
So these are the Jacobs men, the sort of family patriarchs. The one in the front right was a judge and a member of the Cherokee Council. The one in the front left was my actual great grandfather. And he died when my great grandmother was actually still pregnant with her youngest of 7 kids. And they were Choctaw Indians who their mother had died very young. And so when their sister got married, she took them with her into part of the Cherokee Nation. And when they got married, they were enrolled Cherokee. But then around the turn of the century, Judge Isaac Jacobs, the front right, actually had to go before a council of tribes and get his citizenship transferred back. So like whenever we talk about descendants and heritage and like what your blood is, like there's so much more that's politically complex about Native identity, particularly with tribes who experienced removal and, you know, kind of started over. I also just love the contrast between these like very serious guys and then all of the women who are always seen surrounded by their children. And this is the only picture I have of any of the men because they very frequently did not outlive their wives and their wives lived for a long time. So I come from a very, very strong clan of matriarchs.
And I see there's an X on this image. I wonder what that meant.
I think that's just indicating which one is the judge.
Oh, okay. Great. Well, hey, X marks the spot.
Definitely that one.
Let's go to the next image. I love that image. And so this almost looks like it's not a school, no, but what's happening here?
I think that actually it might be the home that they built on their allotment land. So the older woman in the middle is my great-great-grandmother, Joanna Jacobs. And then those are 5 of her 7 children. My great-grandmother is the one in the middle with her doll. And this again was probably also taken around 1908. And you can see how contemporary the clothes are, right? It wasn't like running around in like buckskins and leather community and culture. They wore cotton dresses, they wore suits, they wore ties. And I love this picture of them because I also have one that they went back and took in almost the exact same arrangement when they were all in their like 50s and 60s. And so I just love that they were doing like Throwback Thursday before anybody knew that it was a thing.
Wow, love that. It's a great image. Next image.
So this is the deed that my great-grandfather, Duke Wilshire, got his piece of the Cherokee Strip. So not a lot of people know that when Oklahoma achieved statehood in around 1907, 1908, the Cherokee Nation was like officially abolished as a collective sovereign nation. And so everybody, instead of land being collectively owned, people were given a piece. They were just assigned a piece, about 40 acres to a person, which would not have been easy to maintain. And functionally sort of dismantled the tribes. And it's only been in recent years that tribal sovereignty has been reinstated. So these are 2 of, I think, the 5 deeds, because I think at the time there was him and his wife, and I think they probably had 3 kids at the time. This is one of the actual deeds that sort of represents this destruction of a tribal identity, but also documents it. You know, and I'm a teacher of writing, so of course I look at the rhetoric and like the language they use to describe the tribes, and to describe citizenship is also really fascinating to me.
Let's go to the next image.
So this is my great-grandmother and Duke, her husband, whose name was on the deed before. This is probably her when she was about 12, so probably about 1908 again. They got married when she was 16 and he was, I think, 24, because he was best friends with her older brother. And basically she was trying to decide if she should get married, and her brother told his best friend, Duke, like, you should just marry my sister. And so they did. And like, I also love this picture because for a long time I grew up outside of Oklahoma. I was born there, and then we moved around a lot. And then after the age of 7, I grew up on the East Coast, and I felt a lot of like shame and guilt for leaving. You know, like there's such an association of like Native people with their land. And when I was doing some family research for a project I'm working on, I found out that somewhere between 1924 and 28, these 2 got in a car with his brother and his sister and came to Los Angeles, where she picked fruit in an orchard, or he picked fruit in the orchard, and she made pies. And they lived here for maybe like 6 months before his health got bad, and then went home. And when I found that out, because I had no idea that they had ever just like packed up and left and then gone home again to, you know, finish having their kids. It was just, I still get goosebumps thinking about it, because you hear about the Dust Bowl and you read the Grapes of Wrath, but you don't think of those Okies as being Native Okies, and they absolutely were. There was like little Oklahomas all over Los Angeles during the Dust Bowl.
Yeah, and they also look so young here.
They're so young here. Babies.
Oh my gosh. Let's go to the next image.
So this is my grandmother, Ida Jane Wilshire Pilgrim, who was the first person in her family to do a job that wasn't working in the family store or farming. As you can see, she went to school to be a nurse. And very early, like her first assignment was working in the neonatal intensive care unit. Like your first job was, and she would tell me these stories about, you know, having to give babies injections when they were just like little bitty tiny itty bitty babies. And so I love this picture because it represents all that care that she took. And her memories was so good that one time she saw an obituary for I think, a man named William Mantooth in the paper, and she recognized him as one of the babies she worked with her first week on the job. And I don't know if this is that baby, but that's what this picture means to me.
Wow. So do you, with the work that you're doing, do you do a lot of oral histories? Do you rely on them? And how does that work with, you know, some of these images?
I try to. I've been gearing up to work on a play that's sort of about this like Okie story. And in order, I want it to be kind of a series of interconnected one acts with sort of each generation getting a chance to speak. And so I've been doing all this like genealogical research and this census research to sort of just learn more about them, because there's a strong culture of handing down stories. Like one of the stories that motivates my play is that when my great-great-grandfather died, his wife Joanna went to his brother and was like, hey, I'd like to take over my husband's stake in the family store. And he was like, your husband didn't have a stake in the store. And nobody knows if that was true or not, but it affected everybody's lives for the next 5 generations to not have a stake in this store. So it's one of those things where you can look at pictures and get one piece of the story, and then you have to fill in all these other gaps from either, you know, people telling you stories or just documents that if you're lucky, you can get access to.
Well, speaking of documents, let's keep going forward. We have the next image.
Well, that's my mom when she was a babe. I mean, she's still a babe, but this is like the most babelicious picture of my mother.
I love it. Let's go to the next image.
And it's my dad and me. I related to somebody earlier was talking about like losing that like visual side of their heritage. And obviously I look exactly like my father, and I don't take after any of the women in that like long, robust genetic line.
So this is your dad when he was your age.
Yeah.
I love that. Wow. Next image.
These are my Indian cards, which are just super fraught for me, because on the one hand, I was always super proud of my identity. I was proud enough to get bullied in the schoolyard for it. Because again, I grew up on the East Coast where there's just a different understanding of Indigenous identity. And some of the things that I love about this are that Wilma Mankiller's signature is on my Indian card because of when I was born and when she became our first female principal chief. But one of the fraught things is that on the flip side of that Bureau of Indian Affairs card, there's a blood quantum measurement. And it really represents, again, how fraught these ideas of like belonging and citizenship are. Like, it's messed up that my biggest proof of being Native is that, oh, I have paperwork from the government. Like, that's another thing that I want to work on in my play, but it's hard to do with like very candid dialogue. People don't just say those things.
So let's go to the last image for you, Maddox.
And this is me doing stand-up. This was me doing my last big show before COVID. I got to headline an all Native lineup in DC before I moved out here. And it definitely felt like, you know, again, like I could trace my lineage to all these different people that were collecting and passing on stories in any way they could. And now I'm at this point where I get to like pick up a microphone or tell a story or write something that gets it to an even wider audience. And it really makes it feel like all that effort they went to save these things and pass these things on is going to get like a boost, you know, even if it's just like a signal boost for my being in the world. It's really exciting.
Well, thank you so much. I can't wait to follow more of your work. It's yeah, exciting.
Thank you very much.
So our next and last guest is JUVENCIO SEGURA. So welcome, Juvi.
Hi.
How are you?
I'm doing fantastic. Thank you.
I just want to introduce you properly. Director of Audiovisual Services at USC Office of Cultural Relations and University Events. So Juvi, let's go to your first image.
Fantastic.
Okay.
Well, this is me and my family. Recently, when I completed my master's degree from the Price School in Executive Leadership, and it was a really proud moment for myself and also for my family, as it kind of brought, as you'll learn from my story, it kind of brings everything back around. But it's my wife, Olga, my daughter, Zoe, and my son, Elliot, with his fancy shoes.
Wow, congratulations. What year was this?
This was in 2018.
18.
A few years ago.
Okay, and
and this is in front of the alumni house.
Okay.
And we took this picture, and it was I believe one of the events that was being held on campus, and my family came and joined me on campus.
Commemorating it. Well, there's another group shot, the next photograph. Tell us about this next image. This is It also looks like it could be a graduation or some kind of commemorative moment.
It absolutely is. There in the middle is my dad, who unfortunately passed this past year. So he's still, still in my recent memory. And this is a picture that was taken the day that he graduated with his master's in Mexico, in the city of Guadalajara, from the University of Guadalajara in Jalisco, Mexico. It was a big moment because it was he was one of two people in his town that had graduated from college, period, and one of two people also that had graduated with a master's degree. The other is his brother, who's standing right next to him, Leoncio, who had he had followed a vocation of priesthood, but he continued to study theology, and it wasn't very easy. That's why this picture is so important to me, because they both had to really do some traveling and really just leave the life of a farm and go into the city during the week, come back and provide for the family, which is my aunt Elodia, who's on the right, my aunt Lupe, who is on the left, and my grandmother, who's right next to my dad. My grandfather had passed, so it was up to my dad really to go into that vocation of providing for the family, since my uncle had gone into the priesthood.
Let's go to the next image. And this is continuing with that side, with your family. This is your dad and your mom getting married?
This is my dad and my mom on their marriage day, on their civil wedding, with my grandmother and my aunt Jovita back at the ranch, and they're just
Guadalajara as well.
This was actually in a town called La Sauceda, which is very close to a town named Cocula, where the mariachi was founded. So it was only a short horse ride away from that town, and this is where they took that picture.
Let's go to the next image. And it's like a studio version of what we just saw.
Yeah, so this was a big day. This was actually taken in the pueblo where my mother's from, called Concepción de Buenos Aires, which is up in the mountains in Jalisco, and it was just a great big moment for the town and for my parents. And I love this picture because I just see all the dreams and everything that's to come in this photograph. My mother is there. It's just a beautiful photo that I enjoy looking
Well,
at.
speaking of the dreams to come, let's go to the next image.
So there we are. They got married, and we migrated to the United States, settled in Eagle Rock, California. We were the only Latino family in the entire block, and a few blocks. And but my dad was very visionary. He wanted to kind of put us in situations where to get used to being uncomfortable in such a way that'll make us grow. So this is a picture at our house that he bought in this is in 1977. We're celebrating. I'm not sure whose birthday we're celebrating there, but we're really proud of owning a house and being able to celebrate a birthday in our backyard. I'm the little guy in the blue vest.
Oh wow!
My brother Martin is there in the red. My sister Concepcion, there in the beautiful dress, and my brother Juan over there making a smirky face.
Let's go to the next.
Yeah.
This is also a kind of an image of you on the right, and who is this on the left?
That's my father on the left. You know, when I was looking through pictures, it was I saw this kind of contrast of who, you know, where we were at around the same time. A lot of the stories that I know about my dad, he didn't tell me many of them, and neither did my mom. It came through way of aunts and cousins that knew my dad. My dad was very quiet, but this was us around the same time, and I thought it was an interesting picture to see the contrast. I joined the Marines right after high school. Thought that was a place that I really needed to be, but did my service and kind of kept going. But it was, you know, we almost have the same look if you look at our eyes.
Exactly.
We have this intense look.
Let's go to the next image.
This is my wife and I getting married in El Expiatorio in Guadalajara, Mexico. We decided to get married back in Guadalajara because we both had family there, and it was so significant, and it would mean so much to all our families, and kind of taking it back to there, and we you know we went there and we got married, and we actually met in Guadalajara. We were both on vacation, and we actually met there, not knowing that we weren't really from there, but this it all came full circle, and
let's actually go to the next image, because this is the family speaking of circle.
So this is my full family. I'm not gonna go and
this looks like it's
explain who everybody is.
California, or is this in Mexico?
No, this is here. This is here where I live now in Tahunga, up in close to the mountains. As you can see, all the wood back there we chop, and but this is the full family. This is a year before my dad passed, and we took the time to really spend the last years with my dad. As a group, we made a strong effort to always spend the special moments with him, and you know, in this picture, he kind of doesn't want to be there, but we all want him there, and we just we thought this was a great picture.
Beautiful. So I know last image, Juvi, is coming back to you with your family. Your son is now taller than you.
Yep. So yeah, this is you know, this is the reason why I do what I do. Why I've been at USC for over 2 decades. Is really the joy that I bring to my family and the joy that they bring to me. And we love to travel. This is in Park City, Utah. We're just up there visiting, having a good old time. We you know, we like to travel to Europe and all over the country. But this is just a picture of us just happy and being thankful for everything.
Thank you so much, Juvi, for sharing these moments and your family history with us. It's
Thank you, Thomas.
really, really powerful. Thank you. So so now I just want to thank everyone for being
my name is
part of Family Pictures USC. We're running a little bit over, so we're not going to show our last video, and we're just going to kind of wrap up. And wrapping up, I hope you have a better feel for Family Pictures USA project and the way it could change the way we see ourselves. Thinking of Varun's comment earlier. And I just want to thank everyone who participated and searched through their family archives and helped to, you know, give us a sense of where they came from and how they got here. With Family Pictures USA, we're refashioning the National Family Album to embrace the diversity of who we are. We're looking forward to returning in January and learning from the USC student body about your journeys here. In the meantime, we invite you all to follow us on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, etc., and continue to share your stories and family photographs using the hashtag #FamilyPicturesUSA. And we want to give a special shout out and thanks to the USC School of Cinematic Arts, USC Visions and Voices, Alex Ago, Ponga, and all our wonderful special guests. And finally, be sure to respond to the evaluation survey, as it will help us plan for our January event. And thanks everyone again from all of us at Family Pictures USA.
And thank you, Thomas. I'm sorry, I'm not exactly sure what everyone out there is seeing, but this evening was absolutely spectacular. And if everyone is still on, I know that the evening is late, but I just wanted to maybe have everyone come back on for a quick good night. And I may have to ask a couple people to turn their videos on because I turned them off for them. And maybe let me just see if there's anyone out there that needs me to do that for them.
So it was just wonderful to share and kind of remix everyone's family photographs and albums. I didn't. What was your impression? How did it all turn out for you?
I think it was great. I really think that, I mean, what I realized though, Thomas, is that the broadcast versions, when you do them and they're shown on PBS affiliates, you have the luxury of editing so that everything is super tight. And this isn't that way, but there's wonderful, everybody had great things to say. And like you would take 2 hours and turn it into a very tight 30 or 40 minutes, right? So there's that sensibility, which is cut. But everybody had great things and there were some fantastic moments. And I loved the chat. I really enjoyed the comments that people had. And people are saying things like, can we see the recording? Which I'm kind of shocked by that, to be honest. But
thank you, Michael.
But yeah.
I
think also it showed how diverse America is and how we all came here, except for our indigenous brothers and sisters, how we all came from somewhere else. And we, as an old saying goes, we may have come over on different ships, but we're in the same boat now in terms of how we interact with one another. And I think this could be a powerful lesson for those who want to divide and not allow us to be the kind of country that our forefathers had in mind. I mean, they were flawed, we know that, but they gave us a tremendous blueprint for what our country could be. And I think this story really helps to reinforce that kind of thinking. So again, thank you so much for allowing me to be a part of that. I learned so much from all of my dear colleagues. I can't wait to meet you all in person at some point. We should have a party.
So I want to just let everyone know that's watching or that may be watching this in a recorded version, that we are going to, of course, be inviting students to participate in our January edition of this, and we'll be releasing information about that soon. So I hope that everyone will join us for that on January 26th. And I am just so, I feel like I laughed so hard and my heart burst several times tonight. And I just feel like I've known some of you for decades and some of you just for a few months. And I am so, I feel so connected with all of you. And it was just so wonderful to spend this evening learning more about your families and your histories, and the time that that we've been able to share together has been so special to me. So thank you so much for doing this, and I hope to see you around campus soon.
Thank you, Alex.
Thank you, Alex.
Oh, Alex, you're the best. You're the best.
Absolutely.
Good night, everyone.
Take care. Thank you again.